Welcome back to our third video lesson on classical criticism. In this lesson, we are going to cover Aristotle and his Poetics. Aristotle was born in 384 BC and he was the student of Plato, and he founded a school called Lyceum, which was also called Peripatetic School, where the students were supposed to walk with their teachers while discussing philosophy. Another fact about Aristotle is that he was the tutor of Alexander the Great. He taught Alexander Homer's epics and motivated him to fight like the heroes in Homer's poems. Among the many books written by Aristotle, only Poetics and Rhetoric are extant today. The others have been destroyed over the ages. Poetics is on literature, especially on tragedy, comedy, and epic. Rhetoric is on speech and the art of oratory. And once again, these two books are based on the Greek literature of the time. The plan of Poetics. Now, Poetics survives mostly in the form of lecture notes taken by the pupils of Aristotle and published later. There are only 26 chapters available in Poetics. Many sections are lost. And at that time, there was no such word called literature. Poetry identified with epic, tragedy, and comedy. Poetics is divided into 6 sections for the imitative arts, tragedy, diction, narrative poetry, epic, and criticism. First, let us see Aristotle's views on poetry. What is the nature of poetry according to Aristotle? It is basically the imitation of the past, the present, or the ideal, the perfect. Poetry must have certain instincts for pleasure and musical harmony so that it may please the readers. Poetry must include universal or permanent truths. Aristotle believed that poetry was higher than history because history only recorded the past, whereas poetry could record the past, the present, and even predict the future. And Aristotle believed that poetry is highly philosophical. Poetry could also have universal qualities of places, people, and settings, which means that it can appeal to anyone living in any century from any culture. What is the function of poetry according to Aristotle? Plato said that poetry must first teach. Aristotle was the opposite of his master because he believed that poetry must first please the hearts and then teach. And what should it teach? Civic morality, to move the youth towards the goodness of the state. And it can achieve this only if it has musical qualities. The emotional appeal of poetry is a good feature according to Aristotle. Plato said that emotion is bad for the state and the character. Aristotle said that emotion cleanses the mind. When a writer writes a tragedy, it must arouse pity and fear in the mind of the audience, because these two feelings are rarely used in our real life. And when pity and fear are aroused, the mind moves towards catharsis or purgation of these feelings. This makes the mind healthy and relieves people of excess emotion. So the emotional appeal of poetry is healthy and artistically satisfying. Let us see Aristotle's views on tragedy. Tragedy must be based on the noble actions of good men who must suffer in their life, And by good men, Aristotle represented only the high-born and noble men like kings and princes. Satire and comedy were supposed to be based on low-born men or laborers, tradesmen and craftsmen, whereas epic and tragedy were supposed to be about kings and princes. And tragedy is always superior to epic because it appealed to a larger number of audience, whereas the epic was only for the educated and cultured few. What are the characteristics of tragedy? A tragedy is an imitation of a serious action. It must be complete and of a certain length. It must have artistic ornament or include figures of speech. And obviously, as I already said, it must excite pity and fear to move the mind towards catharsis. Tragedy is completely based on the sufferings of good men, noble men, kings and princes. It must be complete, the plot should be complete. And it should include living and moving characters, that is, contemporary characters who can appeal to the audience. What are the parts of tragedy? Number 1, plot or the arrangement of incidents. Number 2, character representing the qualities of people. Number 3, thought, the minds of the characters revealed through the speech. Number 4, diction. This must include figures of speech, which Aristotle terms as artistic ornaments. Number 5, song, music and harmony to entertain and please. Number 6, spectacle, refers to the stage arrangements and the background. The writer is responsible for the first 4 parts, whereas the stage arrangement manager and musician are responsible for number 5 and 6. What is the structure of the plot? The plot is called as the soul of the tragedy. It is the most important component in a tragedy. The plot must be based on the 3 unities. The first one is the unity of action, supposed to represent the life of only one man. The entire tragedy must be based on the life of one hero. The second one, unity of time. The time of staging must be equivalent to the time that can be covered by people in real life. The third unity is that of place. The plot must include places that a person can cover during the staging time. The plot should be based on undeserved sufferings of the hero because the hero is a noble man. And it must arouse pity and fear, which is the most important component of catharsis. The fortune of the hero must turn from good to bad. And this can be achieved either through spectacular means or incidents. The plot must include a complication or climax, which is the rising action, and end with the denouement or unraveling, also called as the falling action. There are 2 basic plots, simple and complex. And Aristotle always praises the complex plot because the following terms are included in a complex plot. Number 1 is parapsia, or the reversal of fortune. And Aristotle gives Oedipus as an example for the reversal of fortune. The second one is anagnorisis, or a sudden discovery. And for this, Iphigenia in Taurus is the example of Aristotle. A perfect tragedy must include catharsis, purgation, hubris, pride of the character, hamartia, or a fatal flaw in the character of the hero, parapsia, anagnorisis, climax, and denouement. What is the nature of the tragic hero? He is a noble man who must have a hamartia or a fatal flaw in his character. The man must not be completely good or completely evil. He must have a neutral character. In those days, women did not receive any major roles in the plays. The hero must have an error of judgment which leads to his downfall. And he must be a man who can excite fear for his doom, which will lead to catharsis. Thank you for watching this video on Aristotle about poetry and tragedy. Please watch the next videos for comedy and epic.